Nice.
All right, so we got my guy Toni in here. If you would introduce yourself to the camera.
Cool. Happy to be here. My name's Toni Mason. I'm a concert booker and promoter. Been doing that here in Denver for about 18 years or so, and currently work for Bandwagon Presents, booking a lot of concerts and promoting them and managing them. And yep, that's who I am.
Awesome. So with the Creative Questions podcast, what we try to do more or less is learn about people's entire creative journey. So
Nice.
where are you from originally?
Originally, I was born in Wisconsin.
Okay.
Stayed there until I was about 11 years old, which was the year like 1994, 1995, right around there. And then my family packed up and moved to Colorado, and we moved up to Grand Lake.
Okay.
And so I claim Colorado for sure, because I was, 10 years old when I moved here. And so I was in Grand Lake until I turned 18 years old, went to high school up there in Granby, up in Grand County. Mm-hmm. And then when I was 18 years old, I just moved right down the street to Fraser, Winter Park area, and stayed there for a few years and was kind of an ambitious solo musician and worked for the family business doing construction.
What instrument?
So back up a little bit, I started my first punk rock band when I was like 14 years old.
Okay.
We're called...
Now we're cooking. So what about being in Granby sparked the creativity or the
Yeah, I think there was a big creativity spark when I moved from Wisconsin to Colorado, and I kind of feel like at 11, 12 years old, it's a pretty detrimental time of your life where you're kind of building who you are and figuring out who you are. And I feel like my Wisconsin life, I was just a little kid under mom and dad. Once I came to Colorado, I was starting to become a teenager. I was starting to find my clique of friends. Being that I had just moved to Grand Lake, Colorado, it's very outdoorsy. So immediately I was into racing four-wheelers, snowboarding, skateboarding, just being out on my bicycle, like being out all over all the time. And then my friends were definitely a group of people who were all very into music and snowboarding and skateboarding. And so that was just kind of the crew that I found myself with, was a bunch of people who loved to play music and were inspired by music and art and creativity and stuff like that. So yeah, when I was like 14 years old, me and a bunch of friends, we started our first punk rock band. We're called Broken by Law. And that lasted like 2 years, from like 14 to 16.
What was your first show?
Did we ever even play a show, Broken by Law? We practiced a lot. I can't even remember if we actually played a show as Broken by Law.
Like maybe in front of the garage.
I was gonna say, I feel we might have played.
Kids to show up.
We might have played a party in the mountains, but I can't remember with that band because it was so long ago.
Yeah.
And it was only a couple years. But then when I turned 16, I started a new band with like my new clique of friends, and we called ourselves the Offsets. And that was more like, like the previous band was like my kind of middle school and freshman year friends. And then the next band was more like my next evolution of, friends. And I became a sophomore and I could drive and like select my own friends and people that I wanted to hang out with.
Was it still punk based?
So it was punk based, but most definitely, the first band, Broken by Law, was like straight up punk. And then the Offsets was a little bit more like alternative rock influenced punk. We were super into like Red Hot Chili Peppers and System of a Down, and like definitely being influenced.
Offspring.
Yes, totally. Definitely being influenced by more than just punk, adding elements of like Tool and, psych rock and heavy metal and like different elements in. So we're a little bit more of like a well-rounded alternative rock, punk rock band. But we were never that good, a bunch of high schoolers, was 16 to 18 years old. We recorded like one 4-song demo down in Colorado Springs.
Do you still have it?
I do, yep,
yeah.
I do still have it, and every now and then it pops up on my iTunes or something.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny to hear. It's not very good.
Yeah,
but we had a really good...
It's cool because that's like, it seems like one of the creative seeds that started you on your journey.
Definitely. And it's just a huge difference of like the way you recorded music back then versus now. Now everything is so handy and capable and right there in your pocket and hand. Back then it was like we drove down to the World Arena in Colorado Springs because I'd met a sound engineer that worked there and was in a metal band. And I told him like, hey, I'm in a punk band in the mountains and we want to get some songs laid down. And he's like, come down, pay me a few $100 and, you know, we'll set you guys up and we'll just do it one chop record.
So you did
And
like
so we literally, we got to go on the
style.
stage of the arena, yeah. And they just hung a mic up over us and put a few other mics around us.
How cool
And
is
it was
that?
just like, you know, there was no line track, you know, like, okay, now guitar, now bass. It was just like the whole time, everybody go. And it was just recording the whole thing like live as
That's
we
dope.
played it. But it was cool, you know, it was a fun experience. So yeah, that was what I did until I was 18. But then when I was 18 years old, we all kind of graduated high school and I stayed, like I said, in the mountains and I worked up there for 3 years doing the family business. Most of my friends took off and went to college and like went to different towns. And so at that point, it was like the only thing I knew how to do was sing. And I needed to learn a little bit from there. So that's when I went and got an acoustic guitar and bought a keyboard. And I just started learning like basic chords just so I could have something to sing to. So I did that for a few years. And then when right before I turned 21 years old, I kind of hit this, you know, crossroads in my life of like, all right, what am I doing? I'm about to turn 21. I've been out of high school for a few years. I've been working the family business for a few years, which is technically what I should be doing because I'm like supposed to follow those footsteps and be the fourth generation of this big family business that's been going for a while. And I decided I wanted to move to Denver to start going to college. But I was way more ambitious on going for music and trying to become a performer. And I really just wanted to be a rock star. It was like what I wanted. But my parents weren't as big into that idea. And they were kind of telling me like, hey, how about you should go to school for construction management and do music on the side. And you can still do your music thing, but like go for construction management. And they even offered to pay for everything. Like if you go for construction management and do music on the side, we'll pay for your schooling, we'll pay for your car payments, we'll pay for your rent, we'll pay for your groceries. Like
all of it.
They offered to pay for, you know, everything hands down for me. But they told me if you decide to go to school for music, because they know I really wanted to, they said you're on your own. Like that's your own choice and your own path, and you're on your own. And right before I turned 21 years old, I moved down here to the city. And instead of going to the community college in Littleton for construction, I went to Red Rocks Community College for music. And I just took on all the courses I could. I was doing classical voice training, classical piano, classical guitar, jazz guitar, poetry classes, you know, any kind of like public outreach or speaking engagement kind of stuff. Like I would just get into that. So I did public speaking courses.
What sparked your interest to like buck the system and not only do what you wanted to do in terms of what school you chose, but be like, nah, I don't want anything from you guys. I'm gonna go and pursue my dream.
Yeah.
What was it about that decision?
It was not an easy decision to make, that's for sure. But I don't know. I think, you know, when you're young, you're hungry, you're ambitious, you want to do what you want to do. And I don't know, I guess to answer that question, there's like a couple things. For one, you know, I had worked for the family business and I knew that I didn't like it. Like I knew that I had no passion for it. Like I knew it would provide for me. But I mean, I hated waking up every morning at 5 a.m. to be on the job site at 6:45 a.m. and then to be working, you know, as a painter all day, lifting heavy ladders, heavy jugs of paint, just doing the physical labor of it, huffing the fumes, having to wear a gas mask or a painter's mask, and just all the stuff that came along with it. But then I knew also that wouldn't be the rest of my life. Like if I followed the family business, I'm not going to be lugging gallons of paint and like painting walls forever. I'm going to be estimating and blueprint reading and doing what my dad and my uncle do. But I didn't really find any passion in that either. It was like I said, like I knew it would provide for me and I'd be well off like the rest of my family if I took that route. But I just didn't think that I would be happy if I knew that the rest of my life was just going to be working for the family painting business, estimating blueprints and man hours and materials, and running a construction company like that. Like it just didn't feel like it was going to be what I was passionate about. And then I think another thing was just coming from a small community like I did up in Grand Lake and Granby and Winter Park area. Unfortunately, like I dealt with a lot of loss. Like I dealt with a lot of drunk driving deaths, a lot of drug overdose deaths, a lot of accidents. Like I said, I grew up in a rowdy place. Like we were all racing snowmobiles and four-wheelers and snowboarding and like doing risky extreme sports kind of stuff. And I went to a lot of funerals of a lot of friends and people that I knew in my life between the ages of like 16 and 20. I'd already been to like 8 different funerals between those ages, you know, and I even remember my parents kind of telling me like, damn, Tony, you've been to more funerals in the last 4 or 5 years than we've been in our whole entire lives.
Yeah.
And I think dealing with those losses and those deaths is really what motivated me to know that like tomorrow might not exist for you, you know? And so that's why it was like, do what you love, follow your passions, follow your dreams, because you never know if the next day is going to be there for you. And so those are my two main reasons of like pursuing.
And that makes sense. I know I worked in the oil and gas industry. It's kind of like a second, third generation of that. And I remember being on the rig at a high level, making a huge income, like, you know, making 120, 130,000 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And being away from the culture, the creative culture, the community that I had been also working on, and feeling like I couldn't breathe. Like feeling like the air was sucked out of me when I wasn't in the city working on the things I was passionate about.
Yeah,
you know? And then I also recognize, like, when you have so much loss around you. I come from Grand Junction. It's a small town, a lot of drugs, a lot of problems. It's very relevant, very in front of you that, yo, is this my life? Is this just what it is? Like, like that's it. No more reaching. So hell yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you go down, you buck the system, you do your own thing, and you finish college.
I did. So, I transferred schools and transferred degrees. So I started at Red Rocks Community College when I was still an ambitious musician trying to be a performing artist. And I did 3 semesters there. And then after 3 semesters, I had an academic advisor come to me. They're actually encouraging me to leave that school and move on to the University of Colorado at Denver at Auraria campus. Yeah. And they were like, they saw my passion and my drive, and they saw I was really kicking ass in all my classes, and I was super focused and engaged with my teachers and my students, my classmates. And so they said, like, man, you seem like you're really into this, so you should move on to CU Denver. And they even have a music business and music performance where you can do a dual emphasis degree. So after 3 semesters at Red Rocks Community College, I left there and started going to CU Denver downtown. And then it was like, kind of big boy time. I really felt like Red Rocks Community College was like an extension of high school. I feel like the kids I was around were really immature. A lot of them were really young, like 18, 19 years old, where I was 21. So it was like I'd already been out for a few years out of high school. I worked full time in the real world. I paid rent and bills and like did the whole adult thing. And then went into college. Where at Red Rocks, it just felt like an extension of high school, a bunch of young kids. But then when I got over to CU Denver after 3 semesters at Red Rocks, it was a whole new ball game for sure. And there were a lot of incredibly talented people around me that were like way better than me. Yeah,
which is good, because then it drives you.
It definitely drives you. And I feel like I did get so much more skilled in being a vocalist, and like I really got a lot better quickly. But at the same time, I got really discouraged because I just felt like I was trying so hard to be good, and I was trying so hard almost to be something that I naturally wasn't but wanted to be. Whereas some of these kids around me just like had the gift, like they would get up there and sing and they were just amazing. And then you talk to them and they're like, oh, we're not even music students. Like, I'm going to be a scientist, but this is just an elective class that I took. And it's like, damn, dude, like you're so good and you're like not even trying. And I kind of felt surrounded by that a lot. Like I felt surrounded by a lot of people who were way more talented than me when they weren't even trying. And then the ones that were trying were like insanely good. And I just kind of lost my momentum of being a performing musician. And I kind of switched more focus of like, I want to work with musicians and these artists who are so amazing rather than like try to be one. And I just felt like, I came from a position where it was one way or the other, family business or music. And then I chose music. And then as I started getting into being an artist, it was like, damn, I don't know if I'm ever going to make like a lucrative career off of being a performing artist. And I just felt like I needed something more stable and steady and solid. And so I started transferring my degree to music business. And after a semester of doing that, I just dropped the performance. And I kind of stopped performing. Like I stopped playing piano and guitar and stopped singing. I didn't have any bands to play with. And I tried out with a couple bands and it never really worked. And I just got to a point of like, I want to work for the artist rather than be the artist. And so in college, when I was early on, like sophomore year, I started this fictitious named company called Tone Dynamics. And that was just a name to book and promote shows under.
Yeah.
And I started off just by going to some coffee shops around town and telling them who I was and saying like, hey, I go to college, I'm looking to promote some shows, just easy songwriter shows, just looking for a space to do it. And I got my first few shows here in Denver at like the Mercury Cafe and no longer there, Leela's Cafe. And then also
Mercury's about to be gone too.
Yeah, I know. It pretty much, kind of is now as of April 1st, unfortunately. That's a bummer to lose that room. But it was one of the first rooms that I was booking these songwriter showcases in. And then even at the time, I was dating this girl, and we lived out in Lakewood, and she was working at a coffee shop in Golden called Cafe 13. And they also had like this little coffee shop and kitchen, and then just like the spare open hall room that they just used for whatever.
Yeah.
And so I started doing some weekly showcases in that room. And those were like my first experiences putting shows together. We're just putting together artists that were pianists, guitarists, singer-songwriters, anything like that. And I would put the whole thing together. I'd ask the artist if they want to play. I'd put together the schedule. I'd bring all of my own gear and backline it. So I'd have like a guitar there ready for them, a piano ready for them, my PA and speakers and microphone. And since I had become from a performing musician to a promoting, promoter, I had all the gear.
It almost seems like the experience you had as a performing artist, in high school and through college, informed your next stage, which was marketing and throwing events, because you knew what it took to throw an event, you knew how to technically put it together, and then you also knew what was exciting about the music and how to promote it and how to spread the word and all that. It's weird how in life you look back on it and you see how it all made sense. But when you're in it, you're like, I only want this, and I was going to do that. But even the business management part, even like working for your parents and getting that discipline and that organizational system, you learned how to be a business person before going to business management school.
For sure.
And so you were already on your way, which is cool. It's cool to hear.
Right, definitely. That was kind of my first shows I did were those songwriter showcases, and I was just doing them at Leela's Cafe and Mercury Cafe. And
Can I tell you about the craziest Leela's Cafe show I had ever went to? And I actually met my wife because of this incident.
Nice.
So I was a touring musician as well. I traveled all over the world rapping while working in the oil and gas industry. 2 weeks on the rig and 2 weeks doing music. And I was at a turning point where I wanted to get more serious about music, and I was in Denver getting all my storage together, but I had been living in Phoenix, and I was about to move to LA and like do the thing. And I'm staying at a hotel downtown, and it's in October. It's like October 10th, 2010-ish. I can't remember the exact year, but it was so fucking cold. And I was supposed to go meet some friends at this club, Sweet 200. They were some motocross dudes, and they had motocrossers in town, and they had just did the thing, and they had the club gave them a table, and they were partying or whatever. And they were going to be doing that for 2 nights. They were like the sponsored talent for this club for that weekend. And I was supposed to go see them that Friday, but it was so cold when I went outside to literally walk from like the Hyatt or whatever to where Sweet 200 was, like 10 blocks. It was like -5 degrees or something fucking brutal. And I'm walking past Leela's Cafe, and I see this gentleman on stage. He doesn't have any arms. He's playing the bass with his feet. And it was like, not only is he playing it with his feet, he's playing it as good as any funk musician. Dang. Which, if you're a fan of the bass funk is where it's at. And this dude's fucking jamming on it. And like, I stopped everything. I forgot about my friends, and I just went and sat and watched this guy play.
Nice.
And I was so compelled by his performance. I introduced myself and talked to him. And anyway, long story short, I go meet my friends at that club the next day, and my wife happens to be there, and we get married. But yeah, that's my nice. My Leela's
That's awesome.
Cafe experience
awesome.
with it.
Yeah. Nice. So yeah, those are my first shows, those songwriter showcases, and then after doing a handful of those, and I'd execute those really well as far as I put the lineup together. I had a graphic designer that would put artwork together, and then I'd get artwork for it. And then back then it was putting the artwork on MySpace, and I'd go print them and hang them up all over the city and do little handbills and put them in all of the record shops and tattoo shops and just anywhere I could. And those were like my first shows, promoting them and like running them from the very beginning to the very end, and like charging at the door and paying out the artists and doing the whole thing. And then I was in college still. I think it was like my junior year, and I had done a handful of those songwriter showcases, and I was in class with this girl, I think her name was Whitney Wolf, maybe, and she was interning at this now defunct music venue, Old Curtis Street Pub. Used to be there, Old Curtis Street Pub.
Yeah.
And she approached me at school one day and was like, hey, like, I see that you're booking these songwriter showcases, but she knew me personally, and she's like, but I know that you like punk rock and metal and rap. And she's like, well, I see you just booking these like, folky songwriter things. Like, would you have any interest in trying to book like an actual show at Old Curtis Street Pub? Because I'm interning there and I'm trying to find some people to like bring some concerts in.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I would definitely be into that. And so then I found a few of like my favorite punk bands that I knew locally here and put them together and built a show. I'll never forget, we worked so hard to promote that show. And I spent so much money on flyers and handbills and just getting the word out there. And I think it did like 30 people total. We worked so hard for it. It had such a little turnout. But that was like the first show that I did.
But how was it being in there for
right?
your first
It was
big show? Like the energy.
Yeah, it was super exciting.
Yeah.
And then I started, I did like another punk show, and then I did a metal show, and then I did a rap show. And then after I did like...
Who was the rap show?
I couldn't even tell you anymore. This was so long ago. It was like 2008
what's funny
and 9.
is like we've crossed a lot of the same paths.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I can say names of like tours and artists that I work with that like will click. Like, the first time I played a show at Old Curtis Street, I think was with Ancient Myth.
Okay, I remember him. Brandon,
yeah. And then let's see, like I did a show. The first time I played Cervantes was I booked a tour, and it was me and the Writer's Block guys, which was one portion of Visionaries.
Oh, nice.
From LA.
Yeah.
We did like a 30 city tour. Yeah, like
awesome.
but this was all like 2006-ish to like 2010-ish. Like, so there's some overlap.
Yeah.
There.
And I can still picture like one of the early concert posters I did there. It was like a Halloween show. And I remember it was this rap group, not from here, called the Illusionists. Okay. I remember we had Marcus Aurelius on there, who's no longer with us, R.I.P. I can't remember who else was on there, but I can still picture like the all black poster with the orange jack-o'-lanterns and the eyes and the artist names on there.
so you threw some events over at Old Curtis Street, and then what?
And yeah, so what happened from there? Then I started kind of really getting into this concert booking and promoting thing. Oh, and I think the point I was getting to also was I did a handful of rap shows, handful of punk shows, handful of metal shows, and then like my resources dried up. And I was like, all right, like I literally threw 8 or 9 concerts in this room, and that was like everyone I know. Now what? And that's when I really started branching out and like figuring out who the country bands were and who the psych rock bands were and who the different metal bands I hadn't worked with and punk bands and all that. And I really started like branching out
expanding
and
the network.
Expanding the network and the genres that I was working with. And like at that time I could care less about country music, but I was still booking it because it was something else. It was another genre to book. And then, after a while I started getting a whole new appreciation for country music because you start working with it so much.
You start working with the artists and you get to understand the essence of it.
Yeah, definitely. So then I started kind of like going around to a bunch of different venues around town. This is getting more into like 2009. I'm getting into like my senior year of college now. And I started approaching all these different venues around town, letting them know like, hey, my name's Toni Mason. I have this company, Tone Dynamics. I'm booking and promoting shows. If you have any open dates, let me know. And I'd love to pick one off and book it. And I remember I went to like Cervantes with that plan. I went to Three Kings Tavern. I went to the Rockstar Lounge when that was around. Herman's Hideaway, Larimer Lounge. All the places way back then. Yeah. And I got in good with them, and they'd give me an open Sunday or Thursday or whatever they had. It was usually like 5-6 weeks away, and I just put it together really quickly and do everything I could to build it and promote it and make a show out of it.
What was your first big success? Getting 30 people into the Old Curtis Street was a hill to climb, and that's dope.
Yeah.
When was the first show that you did where everything went the way you wanted it to go? The music was impeccable, and you sat in the audience and you felt it, and you were like, I'm on the right path.
Being that it was so long ago now, I couldn't tell you. But I can tell you an experience that I'll never forget from back then.
Sure.
One of the places I booked a show was called the Unit E Music Gallery. It was on Santa Fe and like 12th.
I just had Greg in here.
Nice, sweet. Oh yeah, I saw that. I saw that Greg was in here. So he knows all about this story. He was there. They had that Unity Music Gallery, and unfortunately, I am the reason that place got shut down.
Oh no.
And it's because, I was booking shows all over town, and then I put this rap show together there, and it was with my homie Grizz, not the EDM artist Grizz with two Z's, one Z Grizz, Noah Lyman. It was like him, and I had this rap group from Boulder. Oh, I wish I could remember their name. And I'd thrown together this rap show. We had 6, 7 performing artists. It was like 1 from Boulder, 3 from Denver, 1 national touring. And we all promoted the hell out of that show. And it did so well. Like, we filled the place up to capacity. We had a line out the door, down the stairs to get in. And it got so big that the cops, they came and shut it down.
Wow.
And unfortunately, that ended up being the end of Unit E, because there was, they were kind of like in these loopholes and gray areas operating. And then when the cops got there, they found all the alcohol, pulled all the alcohol. They found the bar money, they pulled all the bar money. They found the door money, they pulled all the door money. So no one got paid that night. All the money got stripped out of there by the cops. And then they got, like a freaking warrant slapped on the door saying that they can't, have stuff happening there like that.
Damn.
And that was unfortunately like the end of Unity Music Gallery after that night.
That's pretty.
Also, though, the story of, like a night of pure success for me, where it was like, damn, like we blew that shit up so
did it.
Yeah, this is after just booking a bunch of small shows. I did like 30 people, 50 people, 70 people, and now it was
You're
like
watching the trajectory.
Yeah, definitely. So, kind of a double-edged sword there. It was like really big bummer to get the eyes of the city of Denver and the cops on the place to the point of shutting it down. But also it was like, damn, like did something here. Like,
I'm on the right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes destruction is a form of success, right?
Yeah.
Like that destruction showed you that you were charting the right course.
Yeah.
And starting to make noise.
Yep, definitely. So, I guess this whole conversation so far, we've just been talking about like my history and getting through college. Then finally in 2010, I graduate college after doing this Tone Dynamics thing and booking all these shows. And I had also gotten a job at Red Rocks Amphitheater selling merchandise for artists. And that was in like 2008. And it's kind of funny how that job happened. Like when I first moved down here in 2005, I got a job at a snowboard shop. And in the summertime, they had a warehouse, and I'd go work in the warehouse and just do warehouse stuff, unpacking. I did patio furniture, building it, and delivering it, packing it on the trucks and all that. And there was a manager at that warehouse, and after I worked with him for 2 years, he was like, oh man, I'm leaving, and I'm going because I got a new job, and I'm the merchandise manager at Red Rocks Amphitheater. And I'm like, dude, I'm a junior in college, I'm studying music, I'm trying to get in the music industry, like, I'm booking these shows independently. I had an internship at Larimer Lounge that I was doing, but I was like, I wanna like really do this job. And he was like, all right, well, give me 1 year and I'll see if I can get you on. And sure enough, the next year, which was the year 2008, he brought me on.
Dope.
And so I did merchandise sales at Red Rocks for 12 years, from 2008 to 2020. And that was a really cool job, just being around those really massive shows, counting in $300,000 worth of merchandise, selling $50,000 to $100,000 to $200,000 of merchandise.
People don't know how much money those tours make.
It is insane.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to be a part of that. And then in 2010, I had graduated college, and at that point, I was working a little bit for the family construction business. I was managing the snowboard shop. I was in like my 6th year of being there, and I was working at Red Rocks doing the merchandise sales. And then I graduated, and Herman's Hideaway offered me a full-time job. I found out that the person who was booking, I think her name was Paige Montgomery, and she was booking Herman's Hideaway for a long time, and she left for a job in LA in 2010, which was right when I graduated college. And so I went over there and got my foot in the door at Herman's, and they hired me to be, a booker and manager, and I ran that place, helped run it from 2010 to 2012. But I feel like that job was a really good job for me to kind of take all of these things I had learned in college and in my internships and in my independent business and kind of take them all into one place at one time. And so Herman's Hideaway was like a major developmental period for me in those couple of years.
You really got your footing under you.
Really got my footing, and I got to learn more about like what it's like to run a music venue and keeping the calendars full. And it wasn't any longer about just like picking off a Sunday or a Thursday. Now it's like looking at the entire
7 days a
calendar
week.
and figuring out where are the holes and plugging them. And definitely, taught me a lot about running music venues and working hand in hand with these bands, even more than I already was, to get them to promote and sell pre-sales. Remember working at Herman's, we were really big on the pre-sale tickets, and we would order thousands and thousands of them, and they were all color-coded, and they'd have each band's name on it, and you'd give, the color-coded ones, and we had a pretty cool tracking system back then
of how many tickets each band sold,
yep,
what they deserved, and if they deserved a better time slot. And
definitely. So that was a good experience. And then at the end of 2012, I actually got approached by Scott Campbell, who's the VP of AEG Live, and he was also my old boss from when I was interning at Larimer Lounge in my college days.
My first show in Denver was at Larimer Lounge.
Oh, nice.
2001.
Oh, yeah. So you know that place.
Yeah.
Oh, that 2000. I think they didn't even open until 2002.
Maybe it's 2002.
Yeah, so that had to have been it. I think that was the year they opened.
Whenever it was my first show in Denver. My first show was in Fort Collins was the Starlight that became Hody's.
I think so. I remember Starlight.
I ended up it was opening up for Digital Underground, and we were there to the end. We're loading up. My guy that was with me was drunk. My girl was intoxicated, and this big Samoan dude, the security guard for Digital, was trying to hit on my girl and take her home. I'm like, bro, it's not gonna happen. And me and this, I'm like 18 years old, weigh like 30 pounds. This big Samoan dude's we're squaring up, it's about to happen. You're not taking my drunk girlfriend home. And she was also Polynesian. She was Tongan. And Shock G comes running in to back up the Samoan dude. And so now I'm about to fight this Samoan guy and Shock G from Digital Underground, who are my heroes. This is my first show at this pay. I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm about to square up, and Money B runs in and breaks the whole thing up and gets me a drink at the bar, even though I wasn't old enough to drink it. And he was like, yo, dog, you're good. And he broke the whole thing up, and it was almost a huge mishap.
That's wild.
But yeah, anyway, whatever.
Oh, man.
So you get with Scott, and Scott puts you on at Larimer?
At Lost Lake, actually. So this is what happened, which, I never saw this coming at all, but I'm a couple years distant from Larimer Lounge and my internship there, and from all those people, and pretty full-time very full-time at Herman's Hideaway, and that's kind of my life at that point. But then I'm also working these random shifts at Red Rocks doing merchandise sales whenever I could. So yeah, and so I'm up there working one night, and all of a sudden there's Scott Campbell, and he sees me and approaches me and is like, hey, how are things going at Herman's Hideaway? And I was like, yeah, they're going good, but I'm kind of just doing the same thing over and over. At that point I'd been there for a couple years, and I really was just kind of doing the same thing over and over, booking a lot of the same shows. And it's you book a ton of shows, you find the ones that do good, and you recycle through them and have them keep coming back every, quarterly or something like that, every 3 to 4 months. And it really was just a lot of the kind of same stuff just over and over again.
And you're not really able to budgetarily go for some of the shows that you would like to go
and that was the biggest thing too, is working at Herman's Hideaway. It was just so independent and so DIY, and I didn't have relationships with agents. I wasn't booking very many national touring shows, and it was unless it was some random thing that someone was reaching out to me about. And I wasn't dealing with contracts. I didn't feel like I was really working in the business of music. I was just kind of booking local shows at this local music venue, and that was kind of what I was doing.
Yeah.
So then I ran into Scott Campbell up at Red Rocks, and he approaches me and is like, hey, I'm looking to probably buy this bar on East Colfax named Lost Lake, and if I buy it, I'm going to turn it into a music venue, but I'm going to need a lead manager to run it and turn it over with me. And he was like, would you be willing to leave Herman's Hideaway? And that's when I was like, I think I would be. Let's go have a lunch meeting about it.
Yeah.
So we did. We went out to lunch, and he made me an offer. And again, it wasn't even really about the money. The money was so tiny bit more than what I was making, but it was way more about knowing that if I was going to go do this, I was going to get to start a venue on my own, and that I was going to be working next to somebody who does have all these agent contacts and knows the real business of the industry and is really working it, as the vice president of AEG Live.
Yeah.
And so I saw the value in that, and I ended up leaving Herman's right at the end of 2012 and going over to Lost Lake. And that's when he had purchased Lost Lake, and then I helped, create Lost Lake in 2013 into the Lost Lake music venue that it is now. And I stayed there from 2013 to 2020. So this is a solid seven, 8 years.
No, I remember a lot.
Yep. And in 2015, James Irving, who was the lead talent buyer for Larimer Lounge, he had taken a new job out in New York. And so I kind of like inherently got his job at Larimer. And then I was kind of like the lead booker and manager, event manager for both Lost Lake and Larimer. And then in 2017, he had purchased Globe Hall over in Globeville. So that was like the third venue onto the roster. And so then, pretty much from 2013 to 2020, it was Lost Lake, Larimer, Globe Hall. And that was my full-time job, keeping me super busy, doing so many shows.
Limitless budget, getting to play with the bands that you've always wanted to.
Yeah, it definitely was a whole new ball game, and just learning how to go back and forth with agents and how to converse in the industry. I felt like when I was at Herman's Hideaway, I was still young and I still emptied my heart and my emotions into these emails. And then sometimes I'd, type up these really long emails and not get a response. I didn't understand why. Like, man, I put so much into that. And now that I'm older and in the industry, like I get it. Like nobody's got time for that.
You're
like
emails.
Yeah, dude. It's like, 2 sentences. Leave it at that.
How hands-on was when you initially took on Lost Lake and then on to Larimer and Globe? How hands-on was Scott in terms of being the mentor or like that?
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty hands-on, especially in the beginning. I think as you got into it more and more, he was a little bit less hands-on.
Sure.
But in the beginning, he was super hands-on. He was, always just hounding everybody to get this done, get that done, and do this and do that. And but it was, kind of an annoying too, because a lot of times he's a busy person. He can't be at all the venues at once, so he's watching on cameras and then like calling people out because he sees stuff on cameras. But like sometimes you only see so much on camera versus like what the situation really is. Yeah. So that was.
And I don't even mean that. I guess I mean was he the, now that you're playing in the big league and you have access to this talent pool that you didn't, and you're sort of representing this larger than life company in terms of AEG and like working with their artists, was there a lot of knowledge and wisdom gained from like a mentor standard?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't like to speak highly of him because I don't like him. Like he was a super terrible person to work with and for.
You and I have a similar trajectory and you know that. But I'm curious, like because I experienced something similar, I'm curious.
Yeah, it was tough love from him all the time. He was not an easy or a pleasurable person to work with whatsoever. He treated people not very well. He talked down on everybody. He was not a great person to work for. But
when you left, he probably broke up horribly.
What's that?
When you left, it was probably the worst breakup. Like.
It was but I did learn so much. I mean, I learned how the industry works, and now that I look back at it too, it's like, a lot of the times he's like super rough on me. Like I understand why. I look back at it and it's like, it's this business is very quick and fast, and you got to be. It's an on it culture for sure.
When I think about my experience working for the person that I worked for in the industry, there was a lot of nuance I picked up from him. Like there was a lot of things between the lines that you wouldn't have been able to learn had you not observed it from somebody that had built that position themselves.
Yep.
And so all the stuff that you said, like they're usually successful people that succeed to the degree that some of these people have succeeded to. They're not nice people. They're hard people.
Yes, exactly.
And that is what it is. You don't even have to say it because people know that already.
Yep.
But it is important for, platforms like what we're doing here to acknowledge, like, you're going to come into contact with some difficult people. But if you're patient and open to that difficulty, you will allow yourself to pick up the things and the cracks and crevices of that experience that will benefit you as a manager, a leader, or an entrepreneur, or whatever. Like the guy that I worked for a number of years, not a nice person. Hard. Like the last time I saw him, he threw a rock at me. Whatever. But I can tell you that I gained a lot of insight and approach to success through my interaction with that person.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I can reflect with that too, for sure.
So anyway, you're at Globe, you're booking your ass off, you're in there, it's the big leagues.
Yep.
You go home for the holidays. What's that feel like? You're not working for the construction company. Your music career in some capacity has now taken shape. What's it like to go back home and be like, I fucking did it.
Right? Yeah,
I fucking said I was gonna do it, and I did it.
It's a good feeling, but I never feel like I'm very hard on myself, and I come from a place of very high expectations, and I just don't ever totally feel like I've met those. I come from a very well-off family that has big houses and nice cars, and had the white picket fence and a big ranch and tons of animals and all the things. And that's not the life that I live at all. I'm very, very far away from that, and I still make under $100,000 a year, and I think it's a really good feeling to know that I'm happy in life. I'm happy as a human being. I've chased my dreams. I've pursued them. I'm stable. I make a solid living in my career, and it's a really good feeling. But I also just feel like I'm 40 years old, and like I need more out of life, and I want to be more comfortable, and I want to be setting myself up for a solid future. Like not that I even at 40 even think about or have any plans of retiring or anything like that. But when you're 20, you're not really thinking about what life's going to look like at 30, and when you're 30, you're not really thinking about what life's going to look like at 40. But I feel like now that I'm 40, I'm definitely looking ahead a little bit like, what's life going to look like when I'm 50 or when I'm 60, And I definitely just have to continue working my ass off to try to find success and try to figure out where I can make good money. And, I just want to keep leveling up in my career.
Yeah.
And that's for sure. So I'll just keep trying to do that. But looking at where I am now from where I was even just like pre-pandemic 5 years ago, it's insanely awesome. I'm so much happier. And so to continue on our pathway story here was, I was at Lost Lake Larimer Globe 2013 to 2020. And then in 2020, it was literally January of 2020 or December of 2019, I got this big offer from these guys down in Texas, down in Dallas. And they said, hey, we have a 3,500 and a 2,500 capacity venue down here called Gas Monkey, and we're looking for a new booker, talent buyer, event manager to come run it, but we need boots on the ground, someone to be here, and we need you to move from Colorado if you want the job. I'm like, all right, well, what's the offer here? Like, I don't want to go to Texas. That doesn't sound fun to me. And so I go meet up with these guys a little bit more, and they give me a really good offer, and it's almost double my salary, and it's full insurance and full benefits, which were things that I didn't have. And it definitely allured me in quite a bit. And then they're like, we're going to fly you down. Let's go check this place out. I was like, all right, let's do it. So they fly me down there, and it was just amazing. Like Dallas, I had very low expectations and was just thinking to myself, like, there's probably no way this is going to happen. Like, I don't see myself moving from Denver, Colorado to fucking Dallas, Texas. Like, no way. Yeah. But then I got down there, and, I really enjoyed the city of Dallas, and I thought it was just a really cool place. There was lots of music venues. There was lots of art. I didn't like the heat and the humidity, which is something I wasn't looking forward to. But when I got down there, these guys kind of like showed me the venues and showed me the city and showed me the cool pockets of where I could potentially live. And I was kind of into it. I was like, all right, like I'm not into being in Texas, but I'm into the money, I'm into the job, I'm into everything else. Like I think let's do this. And so January of 2020, I went to my job at Lost Lake Larimer Globe, and I went to Red Rocks, and I told everybody, like, hey guys, I'm gonna move to Texas. Like, I'm quitting all my jobs. I'm turning in my 2 to 4 week notice right now. I was like, if you'll keep me for 4, I'll stay for 4. If you only want me for 2, then I'll just take 2. And everywhere did keep me for 4, so I stuck around for a bit longer. And then I think it was like pretty much January 31st, 2020, I put in like my last days everywhere, and that was pretty much it. And my plan was taking the month of February off to snowboard and soak in my last bit of time in Colorado. And then March, I'd be moving to Texas to go for this new job at Gas Monkey.
Yeah.
And so all of that kind of went through. And then on March 9th of 2020, it was my next scheduled date to fly down to Dallas and go find an apartment to sign a lease on. So I flew down on March 9th, and that's when I got to like meet all my new coworkers and see my new office that I'd be working in. And I literally visited 25 properties in 3 days trying to find like a cool apartment. And I found this, at that point, I wanted to live at like a high rise, top of a cool building. Yeah. And I found this place called Sky House in downtown Dallas and found a super high rise apartment. And I signed a lease on it. It was March 12th of 2020. I signed the lease. It was like after visiting 25 properties, I was like, all right, this is the one. And then the next day, Friday, March 13th, 2020, I was scheduled to fly home. and we caught our flight, but it was like all this pandemic stuff was unfolding and COVID, and I was like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And so we were like one of the last flights out of the airport that made it before they just shut everything down. And I got back home to Denver. And then of course from there, it was just like the waiting game of like, what's happening? And every morning I was waking up and turning on the news. And even more frustrating was the fact that my roommate I was living with in a 2-bedroom apartment, he knew that I was about to be moving to Dallas. So he took off and he's like, all right, I'm out. And he moved. And then all of a sudden the pandemic happens and I can't move and I'm stuck in this apartment that I can't afford and I can't move to my new apartment. And it was just this whole
and
like
job's in limbo now.
Yeah, totally. And so it was super crazy. And then after 2 months, I had been talking to both my current apartments and the ones down in Dallas. And the ones down in Dallas were like, yeah, this doesn't seem like this is ending anytime soon. And they let me just cut out of my lease in Dallas without,
nice
they refunded my money. Yeah, they gave me my money back and they cut my lease and it was okay. But then I was stuck here in Denver in a 2-bedroom apartment that I couldn't afford. And my roommate was gone and he had like a girlfriend that he got real serious with. So he went to live with her and he wasn't coming back. And then we're like in the middle of the pandemic, like I'm not about to find a roommate.
You quit all your jobs.
And yeah, I mean, I quit all my jobs and God, it was just so crazy. Like I remember having an entire mental breakdown over it because I was like, oh my God, I got my big break in the industry after 10 years. I finally got like double in my salary and like full insurance and benefits. And like, I'm moving on to this big thing. And then just like that was all pulled out from under me. And I was scraping to try to make like $30,000 off unemployment for the year, you know? And I'm like, what just happened? Like, what just happened? Like, and it was like, and I didn't do anything. It wasn't like I messed up and I wasn't going to have the job anymore. It was like so out of your own control.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, 2020 was just a wash and a hell of a depressing year. And thankfully, like after a couple months in my 2-bedroom apartment, they just let me internally move in the building to a 1-bedroom. And they found me one. I was on the 30th floor, and they found me one that was up on the 36th floor.
So you got that higher apartment.
And it had like taller ceilings and bigger windows.
Some of it was working out.
Yeah, right. I was like, all right, well, this is cool. But it was, and then even I remember it being like fall of 2020, and it was like, I'm not making any money. Like I had to ask my parents for help, which was not a fun thing to do whatsoever. And thankfully they were there to help me through that time.
Yeah.
And then I started, I was like, all right, well, clearly I'm staying here in Colorado and I'm not just going to wait around for this Texas job forever. So then I started booking and promoting shows, but it was
back to what your essence were.
Exactly. And I actually ended up in the fall of 2020 relaunching Tone Dynamics for the first time in like 12 years since college. And in college, I had never made Tone Dynamics a real thing. Like it was just my fictitious name I did business under. I never filed it as an actual company or registered it. I never opened up bank accounts or did any of that. So then all of a sudden, fall of 2020, I went and did all that, and I started Tone Dynamics back up, and I, got my EIN, my tax information, and did all that. Got my bank accounts, my business cards, and then through like September, actually it was even like August, September, October, November, I was just doing what I could, working in whatever venues I could at the minimum capacity that was allowed, So like Oriental Theater was a 750 capacity venue and we could allow 100 people in there. And so I was throwing shows where we could have 100 people in there and we were abiding by all the mask laws and sanitizers and the tables spaced out and everyone away from each other. And then I was even doing stuff at the small venues that were only 200 and 300 capacity and we could have 50 people in those spaces. So we were throwing shows at 50. And then I'll never forget just like all the fluctuation of like at first, I could only have 50 people in the small venues and 100 people in the large venues. And then they like opened things up a little bit more and I could have 100 in the small venues and like 150 to 75 in the big venues. And then they went back down in November of 2020 and we went back to the original standards of like 50 people in the small venues, 100 people in the large venues. And then we got shut down again, and in December of 2020, and we got like completely shut down again. So then I started going digital and I found this place in Rhino called The Armory and they were looking for stuff to do and looking for bands and they wanted to do like live streaming. And I was looking for the exact same thing. And so I started bringing these bands into this warehouse and we were like doing these really high quality film and audio captures and doing live stream performances and it kept us busy, but nobody made any money,
But you got to explore different things that you always wanted to but didn't have time for, like
Right.
the development of Tone Dynamics. What does that look like to
Yeah.
have your own standalone thing and grow it and nurture it in a way that you hadn't when you were
Right.
too young to do that?
And I was surrounded by this team that I would have never been surrounded with at the Armory, like because
Yeah.
everybody was out of work. So I had video crew and sound engineers and lighting engineers from like Mission Ballroom and
Yeah.
Red Rocks Amphitheater and Levitt Pavilion that were just looking for things to do as well, and so like we all kept ourselves busy doing
We did
it.
something similar where we turned the parking lot behind Milk Bar into
I
an
remember
open air
that.
venue.
I remember
And then
that.
on one floor it was an art gallery with artist showcase. And so like we turned one space into like a kitchen, and you would pay for the ticket and it would come with a full meal. And then we could let groups go into the art gallery and experience the art gallery. And then when they were
Yeah.
done, they would trickle back to their seat. And then when all of that touring the venue part was done, we would have, like national artists like Claude Van Stroke fucking do a live stream
Yeah, I remember that.
at Milk Bar
Yep.
on the patio.
Yeah, yep, yeah. We all got pretty creative during those
Yeah,
times,
it
doing
was
whatever
getting
we
weird.
could. And then things got shut back down again. And then in spring of 2021, they opened back up again, and I kept kind of doing my thing with Tone Dynamics. And then Andy Rock, the guitarist from the band Flowbots,
Yeah.
band Flowbots, of course. He approaches me and says, "Hey, we're kind of in between on agent and management right now, and it's during the pandemic, so of course we don't have a lot going on. But he was like, would you be interested in being our agent?" And I kind of told him like, I've never been an agent before, and I don't have any connections outside of the state of Colorado. And I mean, like, I know the booking aspect from the venue side, but I've never been on the agent side. And I was like, but I don't have anything going on right now, really, so I'm definitely willing to try it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've had a ton of bands here in Denver ask me if I'd be interested in managing or booking them, and I've pretty much always said no, because when you think of the financials of being a booker or a manager for an artist like that, like normally you're only getting like 10 to 15, 18% of the profits. A lot of these bands are only making a few $100 on their shows, maybe 500 or 1,000 if
You
they're
know this
lucky.
because you've booked a lot of them.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it's like a lot of, all of these artists here in Denver that are asking if I'd be interested in managing or booking them. I'm looking at it like, man, it's not much money. When you guys are making $500 a night, that's $50 for me, which is like not much for the amount of work it is.
Yeah.
So I've always said no. But when Flowbots approached me about it, I'm like, all right, this is a real band with real followers, and they'll sell hundreds of tickets. And even if at the worst our shows only do a couple hundred tickets, at least I'm going to be making a couple $100 instead of like $50,
And you get to learn.
Exactly. I knew that there was a lot of value going with a bigger band like that too. So I said yes to it, and I think like in the year 2021, I booked them like 8 shows or so. We did like Levitt Pavilion, we did the UCCC in Greeley, we did the Mishawaka Amphitheater, we did the Mesa Theater out in Grand Junction. I booked them a couple shows in Utah that I didn't make it out to. But yeah, I think I booked them like 8 or 9 shows total in the year 2021. And it was a great experience. It was fun working with that big of numbers, working with those big of venues with that high of capacities and gross results and payout results.
Yeah.
And it was just a really good experience to work at kind
On
of
the other side.
on the other side, on that next level up for sure.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize was happening too was as I was working with Flowbots, I was connecting and building these relationships with all these venues around the state because I'm working with this big band trying to get them booked. And then all of a sudden, as we're kind of coming out of the pandemic and the band is like starting to be able to tour out more, I have this big agent approach me, and he's like, "Hey man, like I see you're working with this band, the Flowbots. I would love to be their agent." And I'm thinking like, you're a way better option of an agent for these guys. Like you're super legit and professional. New Frontier Agency, which is like a big agency. And I worked with him to say like, yes, because simultaneously at the same time, Bandwagon Presents was approaching me, which is Eli Corliss, the owner of the Moxie Theater in Greeley. And him and his buddy Hamilton Bird had teamed up to kind of develop this Bandwagon Presents chapter of the business during the pandemic. And so they were booking shows like outdoors at the Terry Bison Ranch on the Colorado-Wyoming border. And then, of course, at the Moxie Theater, and they were kind of doing the same thing I was during the pandemic, booking these shows in outdoor spaces, but they were definitely doing it on a bit bigger of a scale. You know, Terry Bison Ranch, you could have like hundreds of people out in a field together during the pandemic, and Wyoming wasn't as strict on their rules and everything. So they were approaching me being like, you know, we're thinking about if you could come on to be Bandwagon Presents with us. Hamilton handles a lot of the Wyoming, and then Eli handles a lot of the northern Colorado. And then they were like, we could bring you on, and you could be like the Denver chapter / Colorado Springs and anywhere else. And so I'm like, all right, this is kind of working out where I can like let go of the Flowbots and take up this new job with Bandwagon Presents and start utilizing like all the venues I have ins at with Bandwagon Presents. And so I, you know, pretty much let go of Flowbots and let them go off with that new agent, and then I went over to Bandwagon
all
Presents.
All the good graces, right?
Yeah, definitely, and it was right at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, and then Bandwagon Presents thing kind of started for me right then in 2022, and I mean, this has been, you know, just the complete next chapter of my life for sure, and I started just kind of opening up all my relationships that I had at these different venues. And some of them were just relations I already had. Like I was already booking shows at the Black Buzzard at Oscar Blues via like Tone Dynamics during the pandemic. And so I already had the relationship with them to just continue booking. It would just be under Bandwagon Presents. But then they also have another location in Colorado Springs, and they were like, you know, if you want to book shows down there too, you could. And so I went and met the Colorado Springs Oscar Blues people and got in with them. And then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, now I've got 2 cities, Oscar Blues Colorado Springs and Oscar Blues Denver. And then Eli owns the Moxie in Greeley. So now I can kind of route bands 3 nights in a row, Springs, Denver, Greeley. And that was kind of the start of it. And then not too long into it, a friend approached us and said like, hey, I know this guy opening this music venue called Lulu's in Colorado Springs, and I think you guys would be a great fit for it. And so we went and had a meeting with him and kind of opened up the doors to working at Lulu's and putting shows in down there. And then it just like everything kept opening from there. Then next thing you know, the Coast in Fort Collins got bought out by some new people, and we became buddies with them, and we start plugging in shows there. And then we had the idea of trying to book shows here in Denver at the Marquee Theater, but being that they're owned by Live Nation, the expenses are just way too high. But the talent buyer for the Marquee Theater that works for Live Nation also on the side owns the Black Sheep and the Vultures in Colorado Springs. And so he's like, well, I know I know Marquee isn't going to work out for you guys because of the expenses. What about Black Sheep and Vultures? I can offer you those rooms for way cheaper because it's not Live Nation owned. And we're like, yeah, definitely. So all of a sudden we have 4 venues in Colorado Springs within like the first year that we're booking shows at. And then we've got the Oscar Blues here. And then we're doing the Mercury Cafe came about like a couple years ago as well. They had gotten a new owner, and that owner was also buddies with the Flowbots. And I guess like in the transition of him having the Mercury for the first year, he just had a really hard time doing it, was having a hard time getting the shows plugged in, had a talent buyer working for him that I guess like lost him some money and didn't do really great, whatever happened. And then all of a sudden he comes to me and is like, hey, like the dudes in Flowbots told me I need to know you and that you should be booking shows at Mercury Cafe. And I'm like, hell yeah, dude. Like I used to book shows on the downstairs at Mercury, like songwriter showcases like 15 years ago. Like I've always, full circle. It is totally full circle. And I was like, I would love to book shows upstairs in the ballroom. Like I've always wanted to do that. And I was even like, man, I remember so many times I'd have my songwriter showcases downstairs in the jungle room. I'd have this little girl on guitar singing an acoustic guitar, and we would just have stomping upstairs, people doing salsa dancing or whatever it was.
I remember all
and
that.
It was always just like so aggravating to me trying to host this little quiet showcase downstairs with people stomping and dancing upstairs. And I always wanted to book the upstairs for that reason too.
Control the tempo.
So it was really funny, just like full circle, that I did get to book the Mercury Cafe. And
did you end up being that you were now developing real relationships and expanding the footprint of what Bandwagon was doing? Did you end up with some equity with them?
Yep. And it's turned out really good just working with Bandwagon and the amount that it's gotten my name out there more. I mean, it's really just me and my buddy Eli. Hamilton doesn't work with us anymore. So it's just him and I are the only 2 bookers. And then he has an assistant up in Greeley, Matthew, who does do some booking and a lot of marketing. And then I have an assistant here in Denver who's just a marketing person and doesn't do any booking. So it's really just me and Eli doing all of the booking. And we're running at 4 venues in the Springs, 3 in Denver, 1 in Greeley, 1 in Fort Collins. We also do a lot of work at the Lincoln Theater in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and the Gaslight and the Rialto Theater, the Gaslight Social and the Rialto Theater up in Casper, Wyoming. So that's how much we've opened up our networks, is all the way from Colorado Springs to Casper, Wyoming. And depending on the artist, that's where I have found my true value is now, rather than agents only hitting me up as the Denver guy, being like, hey, Tony, this band's coming through Denver. What do you got?
Now you're the routing guy.
Now they're like, hey, we've got this artist coming through. What can you do? And I'm like, sweet, let's get them Colorado Springs, Denver, Greeley, Casper, 4 shows in a row, only 1 to 2 hour drives each night. And it's put a lot of value into what we're doing.
Now you can almost route a whole leg. Which is
very beneficial for an agent. When that's like part of an agent's that is an agent's job, is routing this whole tour. And when you can come to Bandwagon and know that you're just going to get like this whole strip of your tour put together, and it definitely helps a lot.
Heck yeah.
So
it's awesome to see like it go full circle and look back to recognize how each step was a necessary step, whether it was the big move down to the city, to doing your own thing, and then enduring a hard owner that indirectly was giving you knowledge that then, and then multi-unit managing in one city. Now you're doing the state. Like, when you look back at life, it's crazy to see the path was always kind of there.
It really is. And it's crazy because when I was in college and as I was graduating, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't go into this thinking I'm going to be a concert promoter. Like, when I had Tone Dynamics and I was booking and promoting shows in my junior and senior year of college, I still didn't know or think that was necessarily what I was going to do. And, my brain was firing on all cylinders thinking like, okay, back then, which was the year 2009 and 10 when I was graduating, like 360 record label deals were like the new hot thing. And so that's what I wanted to maybe do, was start a record label and be a 360 deal. And a 360 deal is you take aspects of all of the artists, you help handle every aspect of the artist's career, but you also pull from every aspect. So you're helping with the merch, you're pulling from the merch. You're helping with the ticketing, you're pulling from the ticketing. You're helping with the sync licensing and publicity and press, you're pulling income. So it's, a 360 record label is helping the artist with all aspects of their career, but then also pulling small bits of income from all aspects of their career. And so to me, that was like, I think that's what I want to do. And then I had this other idea, like, maybe if I don't want to do that, ticketing. I want to work in ticketing. And I felt very frustrated as someone who went to tons and tons of concerts that there had to be this separation of Live Nation and AEG and all these different venues, and they're all independent. And like, how can I just go to one page and find every concert happening and push a button to buy tickets? And so back then I was thinking maybe I could start like a community page that literally lists every single concert happening in the state of Colorado. And it also has links to buy the tickets right there as well, because nobody provides that. You either have to be like, what's happening at the Ogden Theater? Let me go to the Ogden Theater and like, yeah, exactly. And so that was like just another idea that I had. And even, coming out of my senior year of college, I had so many different little ideas of artist management, record label, ticketing, just all these different things. But as we kind of just said, like, I've followed this natural flow of my life, and it was really just like these building blocks and steps that led me to where I am now. And it's funny to think, like, going from booking somewhere like Herman's Hideaway, which is just one venue and one calendar, to then Lost Lake, but then it was Lost Lake and Larimer, and it was like, oh my God, two venues and two calendars? Yeah, and then Globe came on, and it was like, 3 calendars and 3 venues? Like, I'm only one human being. How am I going to do this? But now it's like, shit, that's nothing. Like, now I'm rocking 12 different venues. Like, and we'll probably grow from here more too, you know? And it's, when you think like you couldn't handle any more work, you find ways to do things more efficiently and then take on more work.
and yeah, more fun, more excitement. I almost could see, like, 'cause I've watched you, from directly and indirectly over the years, and now that you have this dope footprint, now that you've done all these cool things and you're interacting with these artists, like, I could see a component of artist development come into play. Because you're, if you were to find the right artist, and it made sense. You know, you've already kind of managed the booking side of a large artist, so you know what that looks like.
Yeah.
You could start putting this, you know, this artist on the backs of different tours that you're routing, and you could develop that, and then
Yep.
next thing you know, you're on that 360 thing,
Right?
which the building blocks are there. So
Yeah,
I wouldn't
yep.
be surprised if I talk to you or see you in a year or two, or
Don't be
am just
surprised.
paying
I mean,
attention.
I'm trying to dabble in it right now as we speak, and nobody knows this yet. I haven't made it public. I haven't told anybody about it, but at the beginning of
Yeah,
the
you
new
didn't tell me.
year,
I'm just listening, dog.
at the beginning of the new year,
Yeah.
I had this band approach me. They're called Citra, Citra, and they are a fucking awesome Denver local rock band.
Yeah.
Like these guys are really, really good, really professional. They're just standout dudes. And they approached me in a pretty jokingly manner, being like, when are you going to be our manager? And it was in early January when things were really slow for me and I didn't have as much workload going on day to
You've
day.
monetized and organized everything to a degree where
And it was just a little bit of a slower time of the year with
Yeah.
the holidays, and I didn't have as many shows going on. So when they approached me about it, I was like, I'm actually kind of into this idea. Like, I could potentially work on managing you guys because, you know, like I have a lot going on with Bandwagon Presents, but I can always make like at least some time for a little bit more. And I especially felt that way then because things were a little bit slower. And so I agreed, and we've had a couple meetings now, and I've been helping out this band Citra, and I've helped book them on a couple shows, and I've helped do a few things, but it's been really slow to get in. Just we had to like organize the whole back end of things, so I had access to their email and their calendars and kind of know like what's all going on. And then as I've gotten access to that, now I'm like starting to work with them a little bit more. But now things are like really picking up with Bandwagon. It's just that time of year where I've got
sure.
like 10 shows a week, where back then I had like 4 shows a week.
Yeah.
And so things are like really starting to clog me up a little bit right now. And I've kind of like in the last 2 weeks fallen off with working with Citra, but I'm not trying to put it to the wayside, and I want to keep doing it. And I do feel like it's the start to something that could be something else, you know, like just working with them. And I even have another band here in town that I really like. They're called The Regular, and they're a local folk pop band.
Dope.
And I've always told them, like, if I ever think about managing a band, like you guys, you probably would be the ones. And then this whole thing happened with Citra. So now I've been kind of telling The Regular, like, you guys, if this goes well with Citra and I figure out what the hell I'm doing and can figure out some things with them,
Yeah.
like I want to bring you guys on too. And so this potentially could be the start of like me starting some kind of management branch and working
Which is
with
dope.
artists a little bit more in depth. But it's also like me trying to figure out if I really have time for it. And I started things with Citra, and now I've kind of tapered off.
or
and,
how to have time for it.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
always ways. You just gotta figure it out. You gotta.
Yep.
How do you organize your stuff in a way that makes it work? How do you utilize your past experience to, you know, acclimate it all into one thing? One seamless rhythm.
And it is, Bandwagon keeps me so busy at all hours of the day, you know, between advancing the shows and doing the settlements and doing the announces and all the marketing. Like, it keeps me so busy. These last couple weeks, I've literally just not wanted to open up this Citra email chain or like chat chain that we have, because I'm just like, I can't absorb all of this right now. Like, I don't have time. But I'll get back on board with it here soon.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll happen.
I'm excited to hear and see that happen.
Yeah,
and I
we'll see.
appreciate you taking the time, being as busy as you are too.
Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully you've enjoyed the experience.
Right? Yeah, this has been awesome. This is such a cool shop that you guys have here.
Yeah.
And it's been good. I enjoy doing these podcasts. You know, it's fun to just come out. I like to be very open and transparent about who I am and what I do and how the industry works. And I think not enough people in the industry do it. There's definitely a very big wall and barrier up between the artists and the business and the venues. And I'd like to kind of open that up, and you know, and that's what doing these podcasts. I've done a handful of these, and some of them we talk about my pathway to my career, like today, of how I've gotten to where I'm at. And I think that's really good for people to just understand and see, like working your way from the ground up to get somewhere. But then there's also just the topic of like just talking with people about Bandwagon and trying to promote my shows and what I'm doing. And
I think, again, as the artist booking thing comes to fruition, as Bandwagon continues to be successful, and you find more time to do another thing, I can see you as an industry educator, in the sense of there is a huge wall. A lot of people, I mean, people still text me regularly looking for a lawyer or a fucking someone that can give them or bring information because they don't understand or know how or what the path is. And I usually give them as much as I can, or I point them in the direction where they can get there. But you're very, like, I pay attention and I know that you're very passionate about the path that you've taken and helping discern some of the myths and secrets of it all, you know, which the old guard isn't and wasn't and wouldn't be.
Not at all.
The guys that own the buildings, that built the empires, they're tight-lipped because they feel, I don't even know how they feel, but it seems as though they feel like that is going to lessen their empire. Yeah. If they open it up, you know, and it's not that way. Like there's and you know, not every owner's been crazy. There's some dope owners out there, like fucking Jeff Campbell with 3 Kings, dope guy. You know, there's lots of dope guys too, and whatever. And we've learned from the ones that weren't so dope. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, got my guy Toni Mason. I appreciate you taking the time, and
thanks for having me, man.
How you do and what happens.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.